I look like it right now, but that is not important. Guess who just got fired from Starbucks after working there for 4 years as a shift supervisor? Me. I got fired. Anyways, if y'all know where I can apply, please let me know. Peace.
According to real life citizens, just in case you forgot who they actually were, according to them and their boots on the ground testimony, the job market is absolutely falling apart right underneath their feet. The really frustrating and disheartening thing is no one in mainstream media, including the data, is suggesting that we have anything at all to worry about. So today we're going to go over 3 different factors that are impacting the job market right now. That's going to give us a little bit more insight on exactly what's happening, because you guys, it's no one thing. There are many different things that are impacting the job market in massively negative ways. One of the things is the fact that we haven't got enough wages to keep up with the cost of living, and the required minimum wage increases are absolutely destroying companies. Take a look at this article that came out July 29th. California's $20 minimum wage killed 18,000 restaurant job, a new study finds. Restaurant owners right now are absolutely getting annihilated. Perhaps the greatest example that good policymaking intentions go awry is the minimum wage. Proponents of increasing the minimum wage argue that doing so will help the poor, but they're getting fired. If we could snap our fingers and make the poor suddenly rich, there would be no reason to object. Unfortunately, in a world of scarce resources, it's not a possibility. The minimum wage actually tends to make many poor workers worse off and increase unemployment. A recent study on California minimum wage increases demonstrates that fact. Now, that $20 increase was a significant increase for the fast food minimum wage for California, which had been $16 before. Fast food employment in California had declined by 2.6%, whereas employment in non-minimum wage intrusive industry had increased by 0.58%. So there's no experiment needed. When the government interferes, things get bad. This contrasts with the rest of the United States, where fast food restaurant employment has increased marginally, while employment in all non-minimum wage intensive industries had risen by 1%. The authors estimate that the negative employment effect is anywhere between 2.3 to 3.9%. Relative to our world where California did not increase the minimum wage, 18,000 jobs were lost. So instead of their minimum wage going to $20, it went to 0. This is a large number, but it's even more jarring when you realize how limited this law change was. Again, this bill only applied to restaurants with over 60 locations. So many other low-wage jobs were exempted. So this only impacted restaurants that had over 60 locations. In other words, those 18,000 more unemployed workers were the victims of a relatively limited change. So why, if the economic research and real world results are so clear, do minimum wage laws persist? Unfortunately, policies like minimum wage, which sound compassionate, will often be popular even if they don't work. So you guys remember that and pay attention and understand voting matters. Unfortunately, politicians have an incentive to ignore economic laws in favor of nice sounding slogans about improving the lives of the least advantaged. Comment below and let me know whether you guys agree with that. That's why I feel like elections are just an illusion of choice, and that behind the scenes, all these people really just get along with each other. It is impossible to understand the history of economic thought if one does not pay attention to the fact that economists as such is a challenge to the concept of those in power. And economists can never be a favorite. Let me know whether or not you agree with that article. I get some really polarizing, passionate remarks. So I'm really interested to hear whether or not you agree. There's other massive issues like the Federal Reserve, C-suite greed, but it all amounts to greed, corruption, and fraud, absolutely killing citizens. And I know that because the videos of these people getting fired are flooding social media, just like this one.
Good morning to everybody except for my assistant manager in the HR department of the company that I work for. For the last 2 days, I have had pre-approved unpaid time off, meaning workforce management looked at my request, looked at the projection for the floor and said, have those 2 days unpaid. Submit them in your workday calendar. Have fun, homie. See you Friday. Some was stupid enough to send to my Workday inbox before having the conversation a notice of a final warning. Explanation: employee did not call into attendance line when taking time off. No, because in the attendance policy, and I know this thing frontwards and backwards because I've had to defend myself not getting an occurrence with their own policy. Depending on the assistant manager you're under, they interpret the policies differently, okay? And then you have to go to bat for yourself like you're a freaking lawyer, being like, no, I took PTO. It was pre-approved PTO. I don't care if you misprojected the volume coming into the call floor, not my problem. Literally, I've had to have that conversation, actually. Not kidding. Apparently, I'm on a final warning. I wasn't even on a written warning. So they're trying to peg me for no call, no showing for 2 days. I have screenshots of the approved time off. I have screenshots of my Workday calendar showing 8 hours approved.
Even with all that evidence, she still got fired. And to me, that is proof positive that the C-suite, corporate America, does not care about you and does not care about me. They care about their stock prices. They care about their commission, their bonus, and keeping their own job and not losing the power and influence that they believe that they have in the company that they own. What's happening in the job market and what's happening in America right now is something that I never expected to see in my lifetime. It is an absolute atrocity. Coming out July 29th, job openings decline and hiring tapers off due, they're saying, to a trade war. The good news: layoffs are still low. Job openings fell in June to close to a post-pandemic low as trade wars discouraged businesses from hiring. But the rate of layoffs also stood near a record low, and good sign for the broader U.S. economy. Job postings dropped to 7.4 million in June from 7.7 million in the month prior. Now, a lot of people are wondering, how does the job market still have so many jobs? And I'm going to tell you guys, remember, during lockdowns, not only did the SBA do EIDL loans, they also did billions and billions of dollars of the PPP loans. They allowed small businesses and big businesses to take enough of our tax dollars to survive through a lockdown. So yeah, all of us are now paying for that. Key details: the number of people hired in June fell to a one-year low and the second lowest level since the pandemic. At the same time, though, the number of layoffs was historically low. The layoff rate stayed at 1%, well below the 1.4% annual average from 2010 to 2019. Although surveys show Americans think it's getting harder to find unemployment, because it is, some 3.1 million people quit their jobs in June. That's still a relatively high number for a supposedly weakening labor market. Normally, it's bad news for the economy when hiring slows sharply like this, but these are not normal times. A chronic labor shortage, one that could get worse due to the crackdown on illegal immigration, has deterred businesses from cutting many jobs, but also AI. Profits are still high and sales are still growing, lessening the need to reduce labor costs. As long as most Americans are working and spending, the U.S. economy will continue to expand and avoid recession. But what about the buy now, pay later epidemic and the school loan epidemic that's happening right now? And what about the fact that real median wages never went up? What about all those very important facts? What if we just stop listening to mainstream media that has clear financial bias and start listening to people that are actually on the street? Like this woman.
I got fired this morning from a company I have been working at for the last 8 years. I've had the same boss for the last 8 years. And yeah, it happened this morning. 9 a.m. I had a meeting booked with my boss. Our HR business partner immediately joins the call. They tell me that due to restructuring, they have to make hard decisions, and they have decided after review at all leadership levels that my job will be terminated. This came as a massive shock. There was no performance improvement plan. There was no conversation about how I could have been performing better. They essentially just told me, effective Friday, your role is no longer here. My only question I could muster the strength to ask is like, what's happening with my team? Are they also being let go? And they said that they could not answer that question at the time.
She was absolutely shocked and blindsided. And when mainstream media lies to us and they hide things from us and they hide the truth from us, then obviously we're going to have shock. However, when we look under the hood, just a little bit, just slightly under the surface, and we prepare, we're not shocked, we're disappointed, but the disappointment is followed by resolve because we knew what was coming and we prepared for that. Maybe we have our resumes, maybe we're networking right now, so that in the event we do lose our job, we have something we can rebound to immediately, because bills don't stop when our income does. And here's the thing, you guys, if the job market was so good, then why would this be happening? TSC layoffs, biggest ever for Indian IT, artificial intelligence not to blame for difficult decision. Top 10 things you need to know about the mass sacking. Now, obviously, as you guys know, a lot of our customer service is sent out to India. And so the fact that there's this many people being laid off, 2% of its workforce or 12,000 employees, means that we, the job market here and employers here, cannot provide them with nearly enough work because the job market, despite what we just read, is falling apart. TSC layoffs have sent shockwaves in India's IT sector. The decision by India's largest IT services firm to cut 2% of this workforce has laid bare the increased environment of uncertainty that the IT sector is currently facing. Tata Consultancy Services, or TCS, announced on Sunday its intent to sack over 12,000 of its employees. The layoffs will impact people in the middle to senior level positions. Now, they're also saying this was a difficult decision. Why would India's #1 tech employer be laying off 2% of its workforce if everything was going okay in the United States of America? And that has to do, the IT stuff and the customer service, remember, that has to do with consumer spending as well. So not only is the job market deteriorating, so is consumer spending. And if you're one of those consumers that are spending, I'm going to tell you right now, stop your spending and save as much money as possible right now while you still have money to save, because things are going to get much worse. And for some people, things are already horrible, just like with this woman.
I'm so embarrassed and mad about it. So I went into my one-on-one at 11 o'clock. At 11 a.m. I went in, and my manager said that there was just a few things that was just concerning from last month, and they wanted to review. And I was like, all right, no problem. So the first was, yesterday I had a day off that was in the system. I checked. I knew it was in the system. I literally have a photo of it being approved in the system, because something like this happened last month or last year, where I had approved PTO and then it disappeared. So I learned my lesson to start taking photos of the approved PTO. And then yesterday she messaged me while I was gone, and she said, hey, you have an unmarked absence today. What's going on? And I said, no, it was approved. And she said it wasn't in the system at all. So she said it was no big deal. We moved on, whatever. I just called out that day. And then I go in for my one-on-one, and she said that because I got flagged in that system, they pulled up the entire system and they realized there was a few other things that they were not sure about. One of them was the fact that my outbound calls last month were pretty low, which makes sense. I had bronchitis. I called out. I had PTO. I also had a little bit of a vacation at the beginning of the month. And then on top of that, my computer stopped working. And it's documented that there was multiple times where I called into IT and I would spend the entire day on IT. And then last week I got a whole new computer that they sent me. And then I had a lot of issues with the new computer. And this, so it's all documented as to why my outbound calls would be low, because I couldn't get into the systems because their IT system is horrible. Their IT department doesn't know what they're doing. But then the caveat on it is that they noticed that every day I've been clocking out for 30 minutes towards the end of the day and then clocking back in. And I said, yeah, that's because I've been working so much overtime lately, and I have to pick up my daughter from school. And my old manager, just before our manager switch, said that that's fine. All we have to do is just flex it out. If we leave for 20 minutes, just add the 20 minutes at the end of our shift. And that's what I've been doing. And my current manager said, oh, well, you're allowed to flex out time, but if you don't tell anyone, you can't do that. And I was like, well, I talked to my old manager, and this was an agreement that I can leave to get my daughter. That was fun. And she even told me that if you're just leaving for 20 minutes, you really don't have to tell anyone. Just leave, come back, and then add it. As long as your time slots add up to 8 hours at the end of the day, they don't care.
They are looking for any reason whatsoever to fire you versus looking for multiple reasons to promote you. That is the current state of the job market in the United States. And I'm going to be very clear with why I'm saying the job market in the United States is going to continue to crash. And we haven't even begun to see the worst. Is number one, because of the overwhelming amount of debt that the federal government is in, which is close to 37 trillion, plus the over 100 trillion in unfunded liabilities. So you have overwhelming debt, you have overwhelming fraud, which seems like every single government agency that is open right now is frauding the citizens. And number three, income. You guys, income never went up to support this. And because all of those reasons, the fraud, greed, corruption, and income, these prices, the job market, economy, the housing market is just not sustainable. There is nothing left to sustain it. And inflation can't do it because that's what caused this problem to begin with. Do you guys think that going into the end of this year, the second half of 2025, are things going to get better or are things going to get worse in the job market, and why? And other than that, guys, I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. And if you guys are out there investing in your lives, trying to survive this incredibly toxic market, you guys already know I wish you luck and I hope you win.